an executive session, and we're now ready to continue with the public portion of our meeting. We had no significant written communications since our last meeting on January 25th. And so I will go right into the president's report. Some of you saw the letter that both the board and the Home and School Executive Council put out with regard to the need to prioritize vaccinations for teachers and school employees. If you haven't sent that letter, if you wish to send that letter to the governor's office and haven't done so already, there's still time because the governor's office has not changed their current prioritization of teachers and school employees. So they are still not receiving the highest priority for vaccinations. We are waiting for tomorrow's budget speech from Governor Murphy, after which 48 hours after which we will get our state aid numbers. The news from the governor's office is that the administration is going to propose increasing formula aid, which is much of our state aid, by $578 million, which doesn't say what that means for us, but there is an increase. They seem to indicate that our aid will go up. We don't know how much. They will also propose $25 million more in extraordinary aid to special education, which is a reimbursement for expenses that go over certain thresholds for special education. So it sounds as if it might be good news for us, but you never know till the dollar figures arrive. The New Jersey Department of Education last week announced that they will be seeking a waiver from the federal government for mandated standardized testing that would take place this spring. New Jersey joins many other states who are also seeking that waiver. There's no indication yet whether the federal government will grant any of those waivers, but we have at least made that application. And finally, the governor announced on Friday in the company of the Commissioner of Education that New Jersey would be appropriating about $2.1 billion in federal money, emergency money, for various uses in New Jersey education. There would be appropriations for academic enrichment, appropriations for learning acceleration, which is the term that they use that some people also call learning loss. There is one bucket of money for assessments in mental health, and still another for grant funding for the learning ecosystem, which has to do with assessments and student skills. Each of those buckets of money have different application processes and can be used anytime between now and September 2023. So it's a very complicated, it is good news that they're going to use approximately $1.2 billion in this federal recovery money to help New Jersey schools. Much of it will go to the neediest schools, but every school district will get something. So that is somewhat promising in terms of help for all the expenses that have accrued from the COVID crisis. And I think that is all. And I should say, with a nod to some of our audience who always ask how many people are on the call right now, we have 33 people in attendance. So that probably means about 20 people in the audience, because that number, the 33 number, includes the members of the board. And now we can go on with the superintendent's report. We are seeing your screen, Dirk.
You may be on mute, Dirk.
I think Dirk is on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Here we go.
Okay, we're all on mute at least once a day when we.
I just want to start off by recognizing that this month has been challenging due to the weather. I need to recognize our custodial and maintenance staff who have probably had one of the more challenging winters for quite some time. They have had to report early, stay late, come in on weekends, just to make sure our schools are prepared for opening. And I want them to know that they are greatly appreciated. The district is in the process of constructing our 2021-2022 school budget. This is my 6th year as the superintendent of the district, and I believe this may be one of the more difficult budgets that I've had in my tenure. There's still a lot of unknowns, as Betsy mentioned. We're still waiting to hear about state aid, the possibility of some additional grants. But I want to remind the public that at our next BOE meeting on March 15th, we will be presenting a tentative budget for the next school year. And I have 2 quick announcements, and I'll get to my presentations then. One, we are planning a parent presentation in March on student well-being. And as soon as we get that confirmed up, we will be sending out a notice. The second, I know I've had individuals ask me from the high school levels about SATs. The high school will be hosting SATs in the spring, and they are just finalizing the date for that. And that information should be coming out relatively soon. All right. So I want to talk about our COVID numbers and where that's leading us. And just a quick breakdown of the last 4 months. You're going to see in December, we did not have, we didn't keep track of the quarantine numbers just based on that. The high school was completely remote in December, and the elementary schools only came in for the 1 week. But if you look at our numbers, we've seen some improvement. But what is also interesting, if you look at the first 2 numbers in COVID, our elementary schools, we really didn't see a lot of COVID cases in October. We're looking at 3 cases. In November, no cases. December had 4 cases. But January, we've seen 11 cases, and we're seeing more this month in February. So as our numbers improved, we're noticing that COVID is starting to hit our younger population more than it did at the beginning of this pandemic. And that's something that we're keeping an eye out on. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen some additional COVID cases, but because of the February break and because of the virtual days, the individuals who've had COVID have not been in school for several days prior to getting COVID. So that has limited any close contacts as a result, and limited our need to quarantine. So we're thankful for that. But as always, with anyone who's experienced COVID, we want to wish them the best and a speedy and healthy recovery. As we start looking at our the town cases, again, we were pretty consistent during the pandemic for several months. We saw a jump in numbers from November, December, and we continue to see a jump within the town. Our region right now, we are at a high risk level, and what we're seeing in the last few weeks, as you look at the different numbers, is a decrease in our numbers, which is noticing that we're improving, at least within our region, and we are in the Northeast region. The state for several weeks were at a red or high risk level, every region. In the last 2 weeks, 3 regions have moved down to a moderate level. So we're starting to see some improvements there, and we're encouraged by that. So I don't want to go there yet. So when we start looking at our next steps, about a week and a half ago, the CDC released updated guidelines, and the focus of really those guidelines were for reopening schools, and our district has gone through that. It really centered on districts that have not reopened to this point. We are waiting to see how the New Jersey Department of Health adjusts their guidelines, if they do it at all, based on the new CDC recommendations. As we move forward, we're definitely seeing the encouraging numbers, and we're hoping that the teachers, as Betsy mentioned, get on the vaccination list soon. So that would also help us deal with the pandemic as it relates to school and instruction. At this point, the administration is reviewing our procedures and protocols because of the encouraging numbers, and looking what we can do a little bit differently. We're also revisiting our phase 2. And at the beginning of this process, way back in the summer, we laid out some phases, and we are hoping, maybe within the first month and a half, to move to a second phase. But unfortunately, our numbers got worse. We went from a moderate level to a high risk level, and we've stayed in that level for a few months. So we are looking at our phase 2 right now, and that would be extending the school days for our cohorts. I have fielded several questions about the end of this school year and about next year and where we're going to be. Ideally, if we can do this safely, we would like to have full days with all students. That is our goal and our hope. It's really, there's many factors in place that will determine if that's going to be possible. But ideally, we are hoping to have our student body back on a full day experience before the end of the school year, because we think that's going to be an easier transition for a lot of our students for next fall, when if we're able to be back in the full day, full student body model. We're working towards that. We're watching the numbers closely, and we're waiting to see what legislation does. And if you recall, last summer, we had a lot of changes throughout the summer that really pointed us in a direction of what we needed to do in our schools. We're hoping that as the pandemic gets in a better place, and maybe that we're not going to have those restrictions on us come either the late the spring or in the fall. So we're as we're looking at this and making our plans with the administrative team, we are reconvening our reopening committee to discuss some of our possibilities and options moving forward. And with that in mind, we are working diligently, not just looking forward, but thinking about our current students, and we want to make sure that they are having a positive experience. And I wish I could say every single student is, but different students are having different experiences. So I want to reassure that our schools are monitoring academic progress, but more importantly, they are addressing social and emotional issues through a variety of school activities. And as I mentioned earlier, the district will be offering a parent presentation to help the parents when it comes to your child's well-being. And I also want to talk about just some of the equity work that's gone on this year. And during a pandemic and the model of instructions that we are and the structure of the school day, introducing new concepts is not the easiest thing to do. But I'd like to give credit to the equity committee, our teachers and our administrators who are doing a lot of work to really prioritize equity within our schools. As most of us are aware, there is a monthly newsletter that goes out on a variety of topics, from equity issues on a personal level and on how it's being addressed at an educational level. And that is being published and on the web page every month. So please, if you're interested, take a look on it. It's called Evolve. Our monthly staff meetings have activities that are related to our equity work. Some of it is just to raise awareness, and some of it is some instructional strategies for the classroom. When we look at our curriculum, one of the things that we've done with the curriculum that we've reviewed in the last couple of years is created a diversity section to make sure that every unit has the topic of diversity integrated into it. So you're going to see that in our social studies, LA, and PE and health curriculums, and we're in the process of reviewing our world language curriculum, which world language tends to be heavy on looking at diversity. We are a member of CJ Pride, and we do have the diversity job fair coming up at the end of March that we are participating in. The Central Consortium for Equity and Excellence out of Monmouth University we're a part of, and we continue to meet monthly with that group. And we do have a group of students who are participating in the student component of it. So they are coming up with an activity that they're going to present at the end of the school year. Next week, we're having administrative training on just the personnel side of equity when we're looking at recruiting, the interview process, the hiring process, and then retaining our employees that are from a diverse background. So the entire administrative staff is going through that training. We've had different staff professional development going on throughout the year in addressing implicit bias, in presenting equity issue. Next month, the high school is having the Garden State Equity Coalition address the staff. So we continue to provide a variety of professional development for our staff. As most of you guys are aware, who have elementary students, we've had an elementary assembly on at the lower level on Ruby Bridges, but at Ridgewood Avenue this week, it will be on the Little Rock 9. We are looking to get approved an equity audit that's going to look at a lot of different components of our district and from there make recommendations based on their finding, much like we did with our security audit that we had a few years ago. And based on their findings, we made a lot of changes within our facilities and our procedures. So we will wait and see what the equity audit will bring to us and how we can move forward in a positive direction. Social emotional learning is a big concept that, especially during the pandemic and lessons are ongoing in the classrooms, they're integrated a lot of times, especially when you look at the elementary classrooms that will have the morning meeting. It's a chance to really check in on students and making sure they're okay. But when you look at social emotional learning, there's several components, and one of them is your social awareness and relationship skills. So we want to make sure that those skills are being taught to our students. The high school has started up the Black Student Union, and they're doing various activities at the high school. I just want to mention that from a district building and from the teacher's perspective, we all have improvement plans, and equity have been a part of those three entities that we're trying to find ways to address it within our district on a larger scale than within our buildings, and many teachers, that's part of their professional improvement plan. So we're seeing a lot of activities going on within the buildings and within the grade levels and within the departments. You're seeing the high school had a community presentation early in this year called Black Lives, Blue Lives. You're seeing lessons shared, articles shared, staff level presentations happening during their faculty meetings. The literacy consultant is working with Ridgewood Avenue School and choosing novels, diverse novels that have been the focus of that work this year. And I know the middle school book read is a book called Harbor Me that has a diversity theme to it. So, and lastly, what I'll mention is our book club and our film club that's happening at the staff level to address equity issues. So I'm very proud of what we've started, and I just want to stress that it is a start. By no means are we at our end point. Last week we had an equity committee meeting just to review where we are with our goals, and we're basically at a little past the halfway point of the school year, and we're beyond that with our goals within our subcommittee. So it's nice to see that progress. And all right, and I'm gonna actually open it up for questions before with the, you know what, let me have Jack DeWitt is going to present our school safety data system report, and that's formerly called the HIB and Violence and Vandalism report. And after his presentation, because I know this first half of the year there wasn't many events based on the our instructional model, so I'll have him review that real quick, and then we're opening up to public comment. I'm sorry. Jack, are you there?
I was trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's both working then. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm going to, as Dirk had mentioned, present reporting period 1 for our SSDS report, which is the Student Safety Data System. That comprises the harassment, intimidation, bullying, investigations that occurred, trainings, programs, violence and vandalism, other incidents leading to removal, and that occurs reporting period 1, which is July 1st of 2020 through December 31st. So it's the first half of this school year. Those results have to go in, and I gather them from our system. I gather the incidents from our administrators, and twice a year they are put into the state website, and we present them out to the board and the public for any questions. So the SSDS, it combines several systems, as I've said in the past, that were used to be separate. Now it's all under one umbrella. There's different categories that will come up. The incident total, which you'll see in a second, is going to be in the first column, and it breaks down our different areas. That includes violence, vandalism events. It'll also include substance incidents, weapons, and any HIB incidents that were confirmed. There is a separate column for HIB incidents that were investigated but not founded. So I'm just going to go onto that screen, and this will, as always, be posted up on the website tomorrow in case anyone wants to look at it. So if we look, as Dirk had mentioned, partly due to the model of instruction coming back to schools, our numbers were very low at the beginning of this year. Traditionally, that is something that we have. There seems to be a lower incidence of numbers that occur in that July through December timeline. I'll talk about that in a second. But if we look, we had one confirmed incident total that was at Glenridge High School, and that was a HIB that was confirmed. There was also one incident that was leading to removal, and that's something that a student is suspended for at least half a day for some incident, and we report anything half a day or more to the state. We had one HIB that was alleged at Ridgewood Avenue School, but it was not found to be an incident. The confirmed HIB incident that occurred at Glenridge High School, the nature of that was electronic communication. The result, it was found that it was something that was intentional. The nature of the bullying was under mental, physical, or sensory disability. And as far as the discipline remediation that was imposed to the student. We don't list that out because the numbers are so small. That is something that would release confidential information, and it might allow someone to figure out who the student might be. It would be sensitive information. I'm just going to go back one slide. I can figure out how to get back one. So as I had mentioned, the HIB incidents, there was not a lot. I had pulled the report from the previous year just to get an idea. Our numbers, again, are always lower. When we look at the incidents, students are starting school in September, you know, they're going through December, so there's a smaller amount of time than generally when we look at January through June as a period. But when we look at last year's numbers, the overall numbers were lower. We did have last year an incident total of 7, where this year there was only 1 during that period. We had 2 incidents that were HIB alleged, so that was also lower. All of the areas, the confirmed HIBs were also lower, and our incidents leading from removal are lower currently. Everything had gone down. Again, as Dirk had mentioned, that's probably partly due to the model that we had, schools starting, how the schools were starting. High school being somewhere where the students didn't come in for quite some time before they actually they weren't in person. We also list out the number of trainings that we had. So I have each of the schools listed. We had a total of, for that time period, that same period, 33 trainings in reporting period 1 and 36 programs. Again, I pulled the previous year's number of trainings and programs just to get an idea of what that looked like for the same time period when it was, you know, pre-pandemic, when we were not in that. Those numbers also are lower. We had 51 trainings overall previously in that same reporting period last year, down to 33 at this point. And our programs, we had 43 programs for the students last year, 36 now. What is impressive is that we were able to have that many programs across the buildings this year with so many other things going on. Students coming in, some of the lower buildings coming in morning and afternoon, some of the buildings that are Ridgewood, the high school, being done earlier in the day. So it was quite impressive that the principals, the administrators were able to have those things, have them in effect during this time where we have so many other factors that are going on. Some examples of the trainings or programs. Central had character education, monthly programs and activities. During the Week of Respect, which happened earlier this year in the fall, Forest Avenue had Mix Match Day, which had the students celebrate their differences. One of the trainings that the Linden Avenue School, Dr. Caravella had done a presentation on anti-bullying for the Homeschool Association as part of one of his meetings. Ridgewood Avenue had Start with Hello activities. The Glenridge High School, one of the staples that they have a strong program is Heroes and Cool Kids. And administratively, and for a bullying specialist, there was some trainings and workshops that we were able to have. The list of staff has not changed from the previous period. There's an anti-bullying specialist in each building. And then there's also the administration in the buildings who are also part of those investigations. And finally, the school self-assessment, which is something that we report out. It was reported out, our numbers that we were going to submit to the state. That was reported out in, I want to say it was December, and we submit that to the state, and then we wait to get our report card. When we do get the report card in those numbers, that's something that'll be shared and presented at a board meeting, and that will also be presented or posted rather online.
Okay, was that the whole report, Jeff?
That was it. It's short just because of the nature of the year. Yes.
Okay, before we open it up for public comment, board members, do you have any questions? All right, hearing none. It is time for public comments on agenda items only, and I'll just go over the basic rules. If you have a question or comment for us, please use the raise your hand function, which is down by the participants button on your screen, your Zoom screen. Raise your hand. You will be called upon in order. When you're called upon, please identify yourself, because as we know, sometimes people's screen names are different from their actual names, and verify your Glen Ridge residency. Everybody gets 2 minutes for their comments. And if you have multiple questions or comments, please enumerate them all at first, so that we can take them in the order that you've given them to us. So are there any questions or comments? Oh, I see some. All right. Let's see. Michael Hurley.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. I just wanted to, I'm not normally someone who participates in the Board of Education meetings. I was on the YouTube. I saw that you had linkage to all the meetings, so I went on. I'm a class of 81 graduate. My wife is 86. Two kids have already graduated, Glen Ridge, and my son is a freshman. And I feel like Glen Ridge has always been a leader in educating kids, Essex County, New Jersey, everywhere. Kind of a maverick. My daughter took the engineering classes when they were offered. She's now an engineer. My second son is studying engineering, and my third son is hopefully going to graduate in 3 years. But I feel like this year has not been a great year for Glen Ridge schools. I have really feel like you have shown leadership. Usually a maverick in education. It feels like we've fallen behind that. I noticed, the COVID response. I'm looking at Mr. Phillips's report. Week of 125, there was one COVID case in Glen Ridge High School. The numbers are down, and I feel like there's no plan at all to bring everyone back. And there's no, and if you look at the numbers, there's no risk to kids. Sweden's been open, no masks, 100% open, and no deaths. So I'm wondering, I guess, if there could be a plan, a concrete plan. And I'm wondering if Glen Ridge, say the state reopens schools, says March 1st or March 15th, whatever it is Glen Ridge prepared to reopen on those days, on that date?
Okay. The state has repeatedly left determinations about opening in whatever form, whether it's virtual, hybrid, et cetera, to individual districts. And there is no suggestion at this time that there will be any hard and fast date, as you suggest, when there will be a mandate for all schools to reopen. Beyond that, as Mr. Phillips said in his presentation, the district restart committee is going to be meeting next week to discuss next steps. Mr. Phillips, do you want to add to that?
I will add to that. We do have some plans in place to move to the next phase, but part of that is working with the administrative team, the teachers, and the reopening committee before we go public with it. So we've all at each building have discussed what are our next steps and how do we move forward. I think when we start looking at being mavericks and understanding the situation, that we also have a governing body who's telling us that we have to meet certain requirements in order to open schools. And that's something that we have to be conscious of. So we are doing a great job of following those mandates and providing a safe environment. And if you look within our region of the Essex County, there's, many of our neighboring districts have not opened schools yet at all this year. So I think we've had some success, and we're working towards that goal, as you mentioned, of getting everyone back to full day, full students. But that's going to be working with our government bodies, the health departments and the DOE, to allow us to do so.
Thank you. I see J and A.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine.
Good. So I want to echo the sentiment.
Can you identify yourself, just because it just says J and A on my screen?
Oh, sure. I guess it's a pre-done setting. My name is Jacob Schwam.
Thank you.
Pleasure. I have a son who's 6 and a daughter who's 4 at Central, sons at Linden. And I'm going to echo the previous caller, the previous speaker's sentiment. We have become a bunch of followers. We're not being leaders anymore. When I moved to Glenridge 7 years ago, the Zillow rating for schools, it was 10 out of 10. Right now it's 6 out of 10. And we have not become leaders anymore. We are following no plan to nowhere. I saw the list also before of how many COVID cases there are, again, like the previous person. Are you waiting for it to hit 0? What is your goal with these numbers? Okay. I'm paying each month for my daughter to go to 2 hours of school. By the time she's done singing her good morning song, I got to go pick her up. Okay. The CDC, as we all know, has stated that teachers do not need to be vaccinated in order to go back to school, which is correct. They don't. I think they need to be more proactive and put themselves on the list. I went out, I got my COVID vaccine. You have to be leaders. If I sat around and waited for someone to call me for a shot, I would never get my vaccine. And this other thing about a parent presentation, there's not going to be a parent presentation. We should be doing the presentation. We're the ones who are suffering while you're all sitting back here making up meetings to have other meetings. You're not doing your job. And it's unacceptable, and it's tearing families apart. And I've said this to Mr. Phillips before in person, and I'm not going to stop. Stop using these virtual days against us. You are using them as a weapon. When we moved here 7 years ago, we loved watching the kids walk to school. There was never a snow day. Never. Now we have virtual. Oh, it's virtual. It's raining. It's going to be too cold. Well, guess what? We live in New Jersey. We're a walking town. We'll figure it out. Get to school.
If you could finish up, please.
Yeah, I'm going to finish up when I'm done.
No, you will.
Yes, I will. I will. And you know what? Here's a new rule. There's no tuition for pre-K anymore because we're not learning anything. Our kids are not learning. They're not learning. You can mute me all you want.
Thank you.
You cannot silence any of us. It's enough already. Do something. Stop.
Mr. Phillips, I think that was self-explanatory. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Pine.
Hi, good evening. Oops.
Hi.
You can hear me, I guess.
Yes.
Just making sure. Okay. Good evening. It's glad to see you all, just even on tiny devices. I think this might be directed to Mr. Phillips because I'm not sure who, as a group, answers this question. But I was definitely pleased to hear that there's the potential for full days by the end of this year. That sounds exciting, and I think it will lessen the transition in the fall to remember how to go to school every day. But until that transition happens, I have a question about the AB days. So I only have a student at the high school. So my question is really directed to that building. I'm not sure how it will apply to the other buildings. Are we at or near capacity allowed in the high school building and or in each classroom? And if we are not, have you considered hybrid students attending more than their one letter day? Meaning if it's an A student, could they be considered to attend on the B day as well? I know it sounds like a logistical nightmare to begin with. I just don't know if maybe even taking a poll would be something to consider. And if there are more than interested than spots, could it be a lottery style, possibly per grade? I know this would all be aimed toward the fourth marking period. And I did hear you say prior to me raising my hand that you do have your next plans, your next phases in step, and you are just putting the finishing touches on it. So maybe this is possible that it's going to answer itself. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Phillips, would you like to take that?
Sure. One of the discussions I had recently, I believe it was early last week with the high school principal, was looking at the possibility of more students coming on both days. And that's really going to be determined by which classes they're taking. We have some classes where we couldn't allow that to happen. It would be overflow, but there's definitely classes that Jennifer mentioned that we could have combined those classes. So we are looking for ways to bring more students into the building more frequently, and that should be coming out relatively soon and from Mr. Lawler.
Okay, thank you. I see Yasmin Veland.
Hi, Betsy. Hi, Dirk. Yes, this is Yasmin Veland. I'm a Glen Ridge resident on Columbus Avenue. Just a quick question of clarification on what full day means. I recall that in the spring, Governor Murphy specified that full day meant 4 days of virtual instruction when the schools were ordered to close. And I was wondering if you've received any clarity on what that means for in-person instruction at this time, and if what is potentially under discussion by the district includes, a traditional 8:30 to 3 o'clock type schedule, or if it would be more of a condensed, 4 hours of instruction in the morning and then sending the kids home after that.
Mr. Phillips?
What we're looking at for Ridgewood through the high school right now is a more of a traditional type of schedule from the 8:30 to 3 o'clock. At the primary level, since those students are already attending every day, extending their hours is going to be more challenging. And we're actually reaching out to other districts to see what they're doing because we still have the AM/PM cohorts. And if you want your child to attend every day, it's tough to extend those hours without having that time in between to sanitize properly all the classroom spaces. So when we're looking at, to answer your question, when we're looking at full days for Ridgewood and the high school, that would be more of your traditional days. And for the primary schools, would be extending their days, but it wouldn't be your traditional 8:30 to 3 o'clock, just because we wouldn't be able to follow the current requirements as far as social distancing is concerned.
Okay. I don't see any other hands. Thank you. I don't see any other hands right now. Are there any other comments? All right. Just a reminder, there is a second public comment period on agenda or other items pertaining to the running of the schools at the end of the meeting. People who wish to speak have another 2 minutes opportunity at that time. Board members, let's go on with committee and liaison reports, as it is our first and only meeting of the month. So since we aren't sitting at a table and I can't go around, let's start with curriculum committee. Michael.
Of course, I muted myself. So we met at the end of January. We got updates on new programs at the high school, some further development of option 2. We talked about the curriculum reviews that are going on in related arts and world language, and we got an update on some of the equity issues that Mr. Phillips spoke about earlier. I think that's all I have to report.
Okay, and negotiations, if you just want to give a quick.
Negotiations, we are in the process of the beginning stages of negotiating a new contract with the administrators. We are given some of the budget issues that we have, we're waiting to hear about our state aid before we go further with those negotiations, but they have begun.
Okay, thank you. Personnel and policy, Tracy.
Yes, Personnel and Policy has not met yet. In February, we will be meeting next week at a date to be determined, and we'll be discussing the ongoing issues with leave replacements, as well as touching on some policies that are coming down the pike, and some staffing concerns for next year.
Okay, anything on Grace?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So Grace has a meeting coming up this Wednesday on St. Patrick's Day. And, or sorry, no, that's next month. Sorry, Betsy, I had Grace as my third liaison report
Okay,
today, so I'm just scrolling through my notes.
I jumped with you too, so I apologize.
No, not at all. So the Grace meeting coming up this week on Wednesday night is for K through 2 parents, although anyone can attend, but the meeting will be targeted to that group. There was a meeting last month, and some highlights of the discussion were a big thank you to the district for launching the Orton Gillingham program and training and the tutoring for the students after school. There are more people interested than can participate, and definitely an interest in seeing the results. There was a discussion around the possibility of a special education audit and understanding what the strengths and weaknesses are of the district's programs. And then a question about the possibility of extending the school day for students with IEPs so that they're not finishing at 1:30 at Ridgewood and the high school and middle school levels.
Okay, and if you feel ready, as long as you are there, if you could do your home and school reports as well.
Sure. So both Forest and Ridgewood met at the very beginning of the month. So some of these curriculum updates go back and the general updates go back. At Forest, they have been doing a lot of different activities for Black History Month. As Mr. Phillips mentioned, there's a presentation on Ruby Bridges. There have been civil rights lessons and generally a focus on diversity, tolerance, and equity. Valentine's Day was celebrated with a friendship and kindness celebration, and parent contributions were made to Valentine's baskets for support staff, which were well received. School photos will be on March 9th and 10th. Watch for updates. There's a visiting author day planned coming up, and Deborah Cronin, who wrote Click Clack Moo, will be coming in to present. And then there's also planning underway for a second grade promotion with many of the traditional activities maintained: memory books, t-shirts, blocking, although of course everything is going to have to be adapted. There's also a lot of recruitment happening for our home and school officer positions. So if anyone is interested, please do reach out to the leaders. At Ridgewood, there's also been an attempt to really try to brighten the teachers' days. There have been coffee runs, there have been cards for Teachers Pay Teachers for additional resources. There were also Valentine's Day baskets at the school with many generous contributions. So thank you. MAP testing is wrapping up, and one change at this time, the middle of the year results are typically not shared with parents, but this year they will be shared with parents and can be used to initiate conversations with teachers during parent-teacher conferences that are coming up. There are spirit wear sales ongoing. There's planning for the 6th grade promotion. Similar to the 2nd grade promotions at Forest, they're also looking at how they can make it as celebratory as possible given the constraints that they're working with. There was an online book fair that generated $1,000. They're beginning rehearsals for Hamilton school photos also. The 16th and 19th with virtual students included. They'll need to complete a health form and also recruitment for new executive committee members. That's it. Sorry to be so long.
Thank you. Getting back to the list, finance and facilities, Mr. Campbell's not here. Finance and facilities has not yet met in February. We expect to meet very shortly, presumably after the state gives us our state aid numbers so that we can work further on the budget. Communications committee has not met this month either. So that leaves us with home and schools. We've already done 2 of them. Linden is Heather, who is not with us. Did Heather send any notes to any of you, board members? Okay. All right, I went to the high school and middle school home and school association meeting. And I think that it was very uplifting because there's an awful lot going on at the high school. Mr. Lawler gave an update. He said that class meetings have happened earlier this month. There's been an incoming ninth grade parents meeting. He went over the new courses for next year, to which Mike DeLu alluded: the African American origins of popular music, the Broadway vocals and stagecraft, and also, which is a half-year elective. He talked about the revamping of the creative writing program to include writing gaming narrative, which seems to be very popular with our students. He also talked about the scheduling timeline and the possibility that there will be some form of move-up day this spring. Dr. Harris gave the middle school update. They're planning an end of the school year festivity for the 8th graders, possibly a carnival. And she mentioned that peer tutoring is available for struggling middle school students. And then Mr. Hill gave the update for the student activities athletics department. He mentioned that it is a constant challenge to provide activities and ways of participating for athletes and for organizations. They're trying to set up more in-person experiences using the COVID parameters, and the wrestling season has been moved to the spring. And that is the high school home and school report. So we've had Grace, GRB, DIA. I have not, Mr. Phillips and I have not met with them this month. The foundation, Tracy, has the foundation met?
Yes, the foundation met on February 9th, and they will be meeting again on March 9th. And I will certainly convey Jocelyn's message from Grace that everyone's so pleased with the Orton Gillingham funding that the Educational Foundation really jumped on board with. Mr. Phillips and Mr. DeWitt did an amazing presentation, and the foundation couldn't have been more enthusiastic. So I'll convey that to them at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, anything from GRAA?
They have not met, but I did notice that the softball registration, I believe, just closed for girls and is just open for boys. It might still be active. There may be flexibility there. So if there are students that want to participate in outdoor softball, baseball, Little League, they should go to the GRAA site and look up the registration procedures.
Okay, thank you. Have we heard from either GRAPPA, the Glen Ridge Art Patrons Association, or the Gaslamp Players?
I haven't heard yet, but I'll reach out actually.
Okay. All right, that finishes off the committee and liaison reports. You have in your packets minutes from the board meeting of January 25th, both executive and regular sessions. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes? All right, Michael, would you move the minute?
Yes, I move M1.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
Second from Tracy. Okay, there's really no comment on the minutes. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle Bellucci,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye. Motion carries. You also have administrative items in your packet. An administrative item. Michael, would you move that?
Sure, I'll move A1.
All right. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Any questions on item A1, the authorization to advertise for bids for replacement, gutter replacements at Central? Any questions? All right, seeing none. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Belucci,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye. Motion carries. Tracy, would you move the personnel items
Yes, I move P1 through P8.
and including the P1 addendum? Yes,
Yes. I
Okay.
apologize.
that's okay. May I have a second?
Second?
Who was that Teresa?
Yeah.
Second from Teresa. In keeping with our rules and the board members code of ethics, all personnel related matters are discussed in exec session. So if no one has an objection, Barbara, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
I have on the meeting agenda, there's a P9.
Yes. you're-
Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome.
I move P1 through P9, including the items on the addendum.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, now, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Belucci,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
All right, motion carries. Curriculum, Michael, would you move the curriculum item?
Yes, I move C1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. Any questions on the virtual field trip? All right, seeing none, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Belucci, Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye. Motion carries. Before we address the business items, I draw your attention to item B2, which is donations. We've received from the Park Sickler Family Trust a generous donation of $1,000, which is a monetary donation for the Glenridge High School Athletic Hall of Fame. So thank you to the Park Sickler Family Trust. And now, Duval, would you move the business items, including B5, which is on the addendum?
Yes, I'll move B1, and it should actually be corrected to B6 on the addendum. It says B5 twice.
Oh,
Yes,
So
thank you.
we'll make
Thank
that a amendment. So B1 through B6.
yes, thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. Does anyone have any questions on any of the business items and including the addendum? Seeing none, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Belucci,
Abstain.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Abstain.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye. Okay, I believe the motion carries.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Yes.
Now we have come to the second public comment period for questions or comments on agenda items or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. The same rules apply, 2-minute rule. And use the raise your hand function by the personnel tab on the bottom of your screen. Are there any questions or comments? I don't see any. One last time, any questions or comments?
I have a question, Betsy, but I'll.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Anthony.
On P7, the postponed clubs and sports, one of the items is the jazz band at Raz. So I was wondering why that one is being postponed where I don't see the jazz band at the high school also being postponed. because I believe there's some mitigation that has been put in place for the high school. And I'm just wondering what's the differential between the two bands.
I would have to speak with Dr. Donovan to find out why. I just think it's, as you said, the mitigation in the high school has been put in place, and it hasn't at Richwood Avenue. We're in the process of doing so, and it might be a time limit, but I don't want to speak to that accord without knowing for sure.
Okay.
Any other, oh, I see that we have one hand up. Looking for the name now.
Did you say before that the elementary schools are not opening full-time, but the middle school and high schools will? That's the first question I have. Second question is, and I'd like an answer, how are private schools and daycares and day camps open, but our school can't, with all the money that we have? That I'm curious about, you know. And would you be opposed to signing a waiver to get my kid back to school full time? Because there's a lot of parents out there that would love to sign a waiver to get their children back in school full time.
Okay, Mr. Phillips and possibly Ms. Cornell, can you weigh in on that?
Well, I'll speak to his first couple of questions. Ridgewood Avenue and the high school are under different models of instructions. Their students come in every other day. Currently, our primary schools are, those students come in every day. So what they're doing is doing a shorter time, coming in every day. The every other day model at the high school in Ridgewood Avenue, they're doing it for roughly 4.5 hours. So I cannot bring students in every day under the current regulations, full day, bring every student in. So if we were to change the primary level to be more similar to Ridgewood Avenue in the high school, we could go full days. But the problem with that is that instructional model is not effective with that grade level, those grade levels, because it would require broadcasting and students sitting behind their computer for most of the day, and pre-K through second graders, that's not an effective manner of delivering instruction. Ideally, again, if regulations change and as as numbers are going down, ideally, if safe, and if the DOE and the Department of Health are working with us and saying that we can, we certainly will do so. As far as the private schools or day camps, I know the day camps over the summer, the majority of them were outside. It was a much different situation. And I know they also had certain restrictions on them to operate. I cannot speak for the private schools. You know, a lot of this has to do with the size of the classroom, the number of students in the class that are assigned to the class to be able to keep the mitigation strategies, which includes social distancing. So every school system faces, even within a school district, every building faces their unique challenges and making sure the safety protocols are in place.
And Ms. Cornell, for those of you who don't know, is our board attorney. Can you address the issue of waivers?
Certainly. Well, I understand the frustration and sort of maybe the appeal of that kind of a concept. We're not in a position to accept waivers for having students come in. You know, that what Mr. Phillips has explained on several instances now is that the criteria is something that we have to meet, whether a parent's willing to waive their own child's rights in terms of a health issue or a safety issue. Doesn't dictate how we're able to open our schools prospectively in a safe manner.
So in other words, it can't be done on an individual basis.
Correct, or on any basis, frankly, at this moment, given what the criteria has been that both the CDC is dictating as well as the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Other questions or comments? Okay. I see that there is someone.
Yeah, sorry, I just hard not to respond, right, when somebody's answering a question. So
We're not really engaging in a dialogue here. If you have one more question, you can ask it quickly. Okay. Let's go on to our next questioner, Bernice Clark.
Hi, it's Bernice Clark Bonnet, Glen Ridge resident. My question was going back to the equity report shared earlier, which first of all, thank you for sharing updates on the equity committee and their work. You mentioned, I believe, that the equity audit, I wasn't clear if you were saying that the equity audit was going to happen this year or that you were still investigating whether or not or whether you would be able to conduct an equity diversity audit this year.
We plan on moving forward with the equity audit this year, so that should be happening probably within the next month or so. We're begin that process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Does anyone else who has not already asked a question in this public comment period have a question or comment? Okay, seeing none. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Moved by Michael. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.